This is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit for March. In this kit, we got a beautiful 49 and Market kit that has a country theme to it. At the beginning of the video, I was showing you that I was going to fussy cut out some sunflowers from one of the pieces of pattern paper. You could see those sunflowers off to the left, and then I also picked out a number of other elements that I wanted to use on my scrapbook layout. For this layout, I'm using two different colors of distress ink. I'm using Vintage Photo and also Black Soot. I usually use the same color on all of the elements on the page. I think that it helps to unite all the elements, but for this layout, I was thinking that I had to use a brownish color on the sunflowers, and then for the pieces such as the black layering piece on the upper right hand side of my mat, I was thinking that the brown wouldn't show up on that piece, so I decided to try it out. So I took the flowers and the leaves and a few other elements. I used the Vintage Photo on those, and then the elements that had more black in them, I inked with some Black Soot. I had such a perfect photo for this layout. It's a picture of both of my daughters when we went apple picking, not this past fall, but the fall before that. And I realized that there were some gorgeous sunflowers in a garden off to one side of the farm. I had never seen those there before, even though we've been there many times. So we took a number of pictures in front of the sunflowers, and I think that the colors in the photos go really well with the colors in the collection. That doesn't happen too often, but I'm happy when it does happen. I have the flowers going on a diagonal. I tucked the leaves behind the sunflowers. I have a few tags and a ticket on top of the photo. I have my photo mounted on some white cardstock, and then I mounted it again on that black layering piece with the alphabet on it. I gutted out the center of the black alphabet layering piece. I just really loved that piece, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't waste any. I was thinking that I would use it on another layout, so I cut it, but I cut it a little bit too much, so I had to use a little bit of tape to hold it back together. And it all worked out, and then I added a bit more of the Black Soot Distress ink to the edges. Next, I mounted the photo on some white cardstock. I just wanted to make sure that all those pieces stayed together, especially since I cut that black backing piece very thin in some spots. For this layout, I did not pop my photo up on some foam as I usually do. Not sure why. I just decided I was going to have a flatter layout on this occasion. The sunflower over to the left has a stem on it, and I kind of liked that stem on the flower. In the end, though, I ended up cutting it off. It just keeps drawing my eye to it, so I thought that maybe it wasn't the best idea for the composition, but I struggled with that through the whole process of making the layout. I wasn't sure if I should cut it off or not. I'm layering the tags behind the photo. I have a white tag, and then I have the black tag with the chicken wire on it. I use a small piece of paper to hold the smaller tag in place. I think I cut it a little bit shorter than I wanted to, so I thought that that would definitely keep it anchored behind the photo. And now I'm layering a ticket behind the white and the black tags, and then I add my large sunflower in the upper right hand corner. For this layout, I'm going to be doing some mixed media on the background, so I am attaching all of the elements together, but not to the background. That is a gessoed piece of thick, smooth white paper that I'm going to be adding some sprays to in a little while. To the left of the photo, I have one of the laser cut pieces. It's a sign. I love the way there are signs going in several different directions. I think that those are really cute embellishments, so I wanted to make sure that I included that on one of my layouts. There are actually two signs that are very similar to each other, and I thought this one fit that area really well. I added one of the laser cuts. It's an image of a black gingham bow on top of the photo. I'm adding some of the leaves, trying to decide where I wanted to place them on the layout. Again, I'm using a piece of paper to attach everything down. It's much easier to just attach everything down to the paper, but like I said, I want to do the mixed media, so it works out better if I just have one large unit that I can move around. I drew some pencil lines to give myself an idea of where the large cluster was on the background. That helps me to apply the sprays in the correct places. Sometimes I'll purposely put some sprays in areas that I know won't show because I want to make sure that I have the correct color. So sometimes I have some odd colors behind the photos, but I think that that's a good way to see how the color looks. Sometimes you really have to just get it down on the paper before you could be sure if it's the right color. I use a number of sprays on the background. I used a Prima Color Bloom 2 spray called Spring Dandelion. That was the yellow color. And then I used some different colors of green. I used a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist in Golden Earth, in Leapfrog, and also in Patina Green. I love to use the packaging technique to spread the color around the background. For this layout, I kept placing the large cluster on the large area where I put the color because I wanted to make sure that there was some color all around the cluster, but I didn't want it to be too much color. I didn't want it to go all over the place. I was trying to control it on this diagonal and have just a small amount showing around the outside of the cluster. I think the best way to make sure that I'm not overdoing it is just to keep checking, add a little bit more color, and then continue to check until I have it just the way that I want it. I like to add a number of layers of color. I think that adding some color, drying it, adding some more color helps the color to become a little darker and a little bit richer. So I always plan to add a couple of layers of the sprays when I add a mixed media background to my layouts. And then I use the heat tool in between, and that does sometimes warp the paper. What I will often do is wait for the sprays to dry, and then I'll run the whole background through the laminator. That's before I add any acrylic paint or any modeling paste. Although I have found that if you let the layout dry fully, you can run it through the laminator with those things. I found that just be careful what you do with a laminator. You're not really supposed to run those things through it, but the key is you have to make sure that the layout is quite dry before attempting that. And I can't stress enough to be careful what you put through a laminator. I've had some disasters where my backgrounds have been ruined. So one thing you could do is you could be patient and not use a heat tool and just wait for the layers to dry. I continue to add the layers of color, and I think that the green color is becoming a lot richer than it was before. Because I have gesso on my page, I'm able to use a damp paper towel and rub away some of the color in areas that I don't want it. Now I'm adding some splatters to the background. I like to have kind of a controlled mess in the background. I really like there to be a lot of different things going on as far as colors and the look of texture. So I like to add a lot of layers. I have the layers of color that I made using the packaging technique, and now I'm adding a number of layers of splatters. For the splatters, I like them to be all over the area of color, especially the part that I know is going to show. And then I also like to have a little border of splatters around the outside of the area where I have the color. To my eye, I think it looks nice to have a couple of splatters to transition the eye from the white background to the area where there's a lot of color. Again, I'm layering my photo cluster over the mixed media background. The background can look so different once the embellishments are placed on top of it. So I really like to have that opportunity to have that big cluster that I can put on and take off. And I really think that that helps me to decide where to put the color and how much to add. Now I'm adding some sprinkles of water on top of the background, and then I roll the paper towel roll over the top. That picks up a little bit of the color. It's something I do on almost every layout. I just can't achieve the look of those little water droplets any other way, and I really like it. It gives that perception of texture on the background that I just love. Now I'm using some Staz On ink in jet black and the stamp that we got in the kit this month, and I'm adding a little bit of stamping to the background. You can see that I don't use a clear acrylic block. I like to be able to control the stamping. I want a little of the image to show in some spots and more to show in other spots, and this gives me a lot of control over how hard I press. I like to have some of the stamping a little bit lighter and some a little bit darker. And you don't see a whole lot of the stamping in the final layout, but again, going back to that idea of having a lot of layers, I think that all these different little layers add a little something to the look of the layout. Here's another layer. I'm using the stencil from the kit and I'm using some modeling paste. This is Liquitex modeling paste, and I'm adding some of these little tiny X's or plus signs all around the outside of the area of color. I know that the inner portion is going to be covered up, so I'm really just concentrating around the border of that big area where I have the color. There was something I loved about this stencil. I think it was that the images were very petite, but they were also very crisp images that were made using this stencil, and I really liked that look. It gave a little bit of a delicate element to the background. Next, I add some splatters of white acrylic paint. I water down the paint a little bit, and then I keep it in a little jar that's very handy so that I could add white splatters. I add white splatters to the majority of my mixed media backgrounds, and even to some backgrounds that I haven't used mixed media on. I just think white splatters look great on a lot of layouts. You can see that I'm adding quite a few, and I go back a couple of times. I don't think you can add too many white splatters. I guess you could, but I've never gotten to the point where I thought I had too many, so I tend to add a lot of them. But now I had this idea that I would use the chicken wire laser cut and I would add a little bit of that pattern to the background. I'm using a dauber and some Distress Oxide in Mowed Lawn. If you look really, really carefully, you could see a little hint of this, but it didn't really have the impact that I thought it would. Probably if I used a contrasting color, it would have been a little bit more visible. I cleaned up a little bit of the color in the upper right hand corner. I thought that it went too far to the edge of the paper. So after I did that, I added a few more of the white acrylic paint splatters, and then I set the background aside to dry. It's finally complete. I wanted to add something to the tags. I often add ribbon, but I thought that because of the country theme in this layout, that some twine would match it a little bit better. For the white tag, I used a black and white twine, and then for the black tag with the chicken wire, I used some solid black twine. And I decided to just go ahead and tie the twine into bows. I spent a little bit of time making sure that the bows looked at least somewhat symmetrical, and then I trimmed back the ends of the twine a little bit as well. I spoke a little too soon before when I said the background was complete. I forgot that I also added some splatters of black acrylic paint, again, slightly watered down to make it easier to splatter. And then once those splatters had dried, I was ready to attach the photo and the embellishments to the background. I used some ATG adhesive to attach them, but I do go back and add some wet glue because the ATG adhesive can sometimes not work so well on a mixed media background in the long run. So I like to add at least a little bit of gel glue to make sure that everything stays put over a long period of time. I wasn't super happy with the way the leaves that were to the right of the tag were arranged on the layout, so I worked on those a little bit and spread a couple of leaves around the layout. I just wanted to make sure that I liked the way the leaves were spaced. Now I'm adding a title. It's going to be Country Garden. I'm using some thickers, and I believe I got these quite a long time ago in a My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit, and they worked so well with this collection, so I thought that I would break them out. Not only were they just the right color, but they were a great size for this particular layout. I usually like to straighten out and attach down the letters off camera just because it's so tedious. I covered up my photo with a piece of acetate, and then I used some white acrylic paint and I put just a few splatters on the embellishments. I just thought it would look nice if there was some consistency between the background and the embellishments. And I wiped away a couple of spots of white acrylic paint that I wasn't crazy about. You have to be really careful doing that. You can sometimes make a mess, and I speak from experience with that. I always like to put elements that are in the rest of the layout in the area where I have my title. I don't like the title and the rest of the layout to look super different. I like there to be something that ties them together. So I cut out a sunflower and a couple of leaves, and I layered those together, and then I tucked that sunflower under the letters that were on the right-hand side of the title. I wanted the sunflower to be touching the title so that it would look like a unit. And then I finished off embellishing the layout by adding a number of these bees. I placed some around the flowers. I also added one to the sunflower on the title, again, to have bees in the different areas of the layout and tie everything together. I used some ATG adhesive and I attached them down, and that was the last touch, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. Please take a look in the description box. You'll find a link to the My Creative Scrapbook website. You can check out all the kits and order a subscription if you are interested. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.